Hi, my name's Alex O'Brien and I'm a permaculture teacher and designer. I've been practicing permaculture for about 5 years now, and I usually travel to teach and install systems. Because of current circumstances, I've had my wings clipped, and this has led me to some new exciting opportunities. Number one, I've had the time to work on my parents' property with plans that I've been making for years, and that's been really gratifying. And I wanted to share that knowledge. So I've also been teaching online using Zoom, which is a new opportunity for me. I teach in the real world with people. So I wanted to share my knowledge with the widest audience available in the most accessible way. Hence, I came up with this virtual classroom concept so that you, the viewer, can get all the benefit of a classroom environment from your own couch at your own pace. I ran a 4-week Fundamentals of Permaculture course with 4 students who had no experience of permaculture. I gave them the opportunity to have an interactive curriculum, and this is what we came out with. Using the recordings from their course, I have made 7 videos, which in combination with my intro to permaculture video, encompass a basic course in permaculture application. This is not a substitute for a permaculture design course. The permaculture design course is a 72-hour curriculum, which is fantastic. It is based in knowledge accumulation as well as community building, and it is an amazing experience. For anybody who has the opportunity, please go and visit a permaculture design course. But for those of us who it isn't accessible, I mean, it's 7 days out of your life, right? Most people can't make that kind of time. This course is like a primer. I'm hoping that it can stand alone to teach you the fundamentals and the language so that you can start your journey with permaculture. I encourage you to watch the videos in order, starting with the introduction to permaculture, so that you can get the most value for your time investment. You're investing your time, and I'm giving you the value that I can give. And it's a lot. I have squeezed every bit of value into these videos that I possibly can so that you can access this knowledge for free at your own pace. So with that, welcome to your virtual learning space. The more you can remove yourself from daily distractions in this space, the better. I encourage you to pick up on every tiny bit of knowledge that I am giving. So without further ado, on with the show. As always, if you learn something interesting, please go teach someone immediately because it'll help you learn it and it'll spread the news. You know, if it's interesting, it's a good thing to spread. Okay, so here we are. Sectors planning starts from like the biggest scope to the smallest scope, right? So like we're going to start out from way out. We're in space, right? Here's Ireland, and the project that we're going to deal with is in the south of the Republic of Ireland. It is in County Cork. It's in Castlemartyr, and this is my house right here. So as you can see, it's in a pretty built up kind of housing estate. Nothing really special in terms of size. Here's the plot, and it is 190 square meters, which by anybody's standards is very small. There's no way around that. I'm not going to be grazing cows, right? So any projects that I do are going to have to be relatively small scale and be smart about the planning, right? So here's a shot from the front. You can see my parents are already quite forward thinking. We've got solar panels. My dad's got a plug-in hybrid. There's lots of stuff growing. There's lots of stuff going on the property itself, the house, the deck, and the shed take up about a third of the property altogether. So just a little under a half, really, of my property is taken up with just the house, a deck, which is obviously not very productive, and a shed. I'm actually going to put another shed in there, so there's going to be more built space, but we'll talk about that in a little while. What the first thing to start with is, what do we want from the project? So there's 3 of us living in the house. I don't normally live here. I normally travel and I come back to Ireland for like 3 or 4 weeks at a time, and then I travel. So I don't like live here as much as my parents do. My parents live here full time. Their wants, so their wants and needs are the primary drivers for this project, right? So my mom really loves butterflies and flowers. Those are her driving forces. She wants butterflies and flowers. She also really likes berries. So our primary course of action for making a happy mom is berries, flowers, pollinators, bringing in beautiful nature, right? My dad loves his koi fish. So we've got a koi pond out the back, which is his primary interest in the property. And then, as well as that, he loves to feed the birds. So we have bird feeders everywhere, which is fantastic because that's predator habitat. That's a place for our predators to live and to scope out the different areas of our property. By feeding them for so long, we've had a lot of them kind of get very attached to our property, which is nice. And then my wants from the property is I'd like to build an office in the back so that I'll have a dedicated office. I also want to grow some food, and I want it to be easy, right? Now, there is nothing shameful about wanting a job to be easy. So if we plan correctly, we're going to get it. It's the idea of like work smart versus work hard, right? So how do we plan? We start off by thinking about 4 dimensions, right? So when we're planning in a normal circumstance, we think about 3 dimensions. How wide is it? How deep is it? How tall is it? And then we place an item based on that. But we're taking into account another dimension. So because we're dealing with growing things, they get bigger over time. And while it might be difficult to predict exactly how big they're going to get, because some of them get pretty big, it can be easier to take into account how large the, let's say, the canopy of a fruit tree, right? So if we plant a fruit tree when it's young, it's going to be this big, like tiny, right? And 10 years from now, that is going to be a big tree. So for the moment, we can use the space around it, but we have to take into account that once that canopy gets big, it's going to shade out everything underneath it, right? So we're taking into account the time as well. We want to minimize work. Again, this isn't shameful. We don't want to work more than we have to. Work smart, not hard. We're always thinking about connections. How can we weave a life web? How can we tie into our natural environment in ways that will make our system more resilient, right? These all making sense? Everyone give me a thumbs up? Yes, cool. So this is how we work. We observe, we think, we plan, and we work. And we want to break it down in this way. We want to think, plan, observe. We want to do that stuff for 10 hours for every 1 hour of work we do. Okay? So you can think about how productive an hour of work that you've really, really planned out very well is versus an hour of work where you haven't done the plan. And I think a lot of people approach a project by going, oh, cool, I'll just jump into this and then I'll problem solve as I go, right? But that actually leads to being much less effective. If we take the time to sit, think, and be like, what do I need to get? Do I need to get some more plants? Do I need to buy a shovel? You know, so that we're not going, okay, cool, I'm ready to work. Oh, I must go to the hardware store and get a shovel, right? So to accomplish our aims, we're going to use zones, which is what we were talking about with planning. And we're going to use sectors, which is what our observations are, to place elements, which is our application, right? So here we have a flower box that I made last week out the front of our house. This is where my mom likes to come for her cup of tea in the morning. There originally wasn't a flower box there, but there is now. And that is part of the permaculture plan for this property. My mom wants more flowers. This is a box that's been placed to have flowers in it. Hopefully the butterflies come in and play around her while she's having her cup of tea, so I get loads of smiles. So we placed the flower box in the full sun sector. It's on the southern side of the house. We're going to go into sectors in a minute, but I'll just give you a caveat how it went about, right? I put a trellis on the back of it because on the western side of our property, we get like very strong winds. And I don't want those winds to affect my mom while she's having her tea, or the plants that are going to be growing there. So I've blocked off that bit of wind from hitting that small area there. And because it's an element that's visited daily, we've put it really close to the house, the center of being. Like literally, the picture that I have here, I was standing at the front door. So it's like 3-4 steps from the front door. So observations are what form the basis of our sector map. And our sectors are about external influences on our system, right? So they're all the things coming in from the outside. We're going to talk about sun, wind, and precipitation, and they're all covered by climate, right? We're going to talk about topography, climate zone, and the soil map, because those are tied up with the geography of an area, right? And then we're going to talk about the community. So the existing community, we're going to call it local. The community that's been brought in, we're going to call it imported. And that's going to deal with plants and animals. I could do a bit on like human community, but I think everyone kind of gets how human communities work. We all make friends. That's the way human communities operate. So these form the basis of our sector map. And this is what my basic sector map looks like. It just seems like really, really simple, but as I break it down, it'll make a lot of sense. This is what anybody could make. I mean, I did this in 3 or 4 minutes on my phone, basically, right? So what did I observe in my area here in Castlemartyr? So I went to SunCalc. It's a free website that does sun angle calculations, right? And this is the pop-up that I got when I went to this site. It was at 6:51 on May the 5th, and it tells me everything that's happening with the sun, right? If we look over on the right, you can see like my house is like the center of the dot, right? The sun is coming up on the left-hand side, but it's coming up kind of behind me, right? And it's going down slightly behind me on the right-hand side. The circle that's on the arc is representing the sun position right now, and the slightly darker yellow arc in the middle is representing where the sun will pass today. So it's going to go like that. It's going to do a really high arc, and it's going to come down the other side and come up behind us, right? So this website is really handy. It can help you to calculate for any place and any time. You just move the sliders around and it'll tell you where the sun is going to be. It's got a list of the dawn, sunrise, culmination, sunset, dusk, the day duration. There's so much information on this site. It's really, really good. And I use that to make the path for my summer and my winter solstice. Okay, so this is the maximum day length versus the minimum day length. If we look at the summer solstice is on the left-hand side. If I was standing where that red dot is, the sun is actually coming up like way, way back here. And it's coming right up over the top of my head, and it's doing like a really, really tall arc. Okay? And if we look at the one on the right, which is the winter solstice, I could stand in one spot and see the sunrise and sunset. It's going to come up like here, and it's going to go, and it's going to go down like here, right? Really, really small sun sector. So we're talking about the difference between a 16-hour day and an 8-hour day, sun-wise, okay? So next we're going to talk about the wind and the climate graph. So I got the wind from Met Éireann, and this is a windrose. So these are easy to read once you know what you're looking at, right? So the circles coming out represent probability. Obviously the directions mean wind coming from that direction, and the colors correspond to the intensity of that wind. So if we look at the yellow, which is less than 5 knots, it's coming from the southwest, let's say 1% of the time, right? And we're getting about the same reading for the 20 to 35 knots, which is the light blue, which is very high wind, relatively speaking, right? So if we just break it down like that, we can see that most of our wind here in Cork is coming from the southwest, mostly from the west. The other thing we need to know is precipitation and mean temperatures. This is another free website where you can go, climatedata.org. They gave me all the readout like this that quick. We can see like the precipitation is very high. Welcome to Ireland. The temperatures are quite low. Again, welcome to Ireland. But we can see how our year is going to look just by looking at that. We're getting good temperatures in, for example, July. We've got a good temperature and we've got a low precipitation rate. This is an average precipitation rate, but June and July are more likely to be warm and dry, right? And this feeds into our climate zone, which we'll talk about right now. So we have topography. The topography of my area is that it's relatively flat. And from personal experience, I feel wind effects from the buildings. Like as I'm walking around, you can feel these tunnels of wind being shifted around by the buildings. If you had large mountains in your area, that would be a topography which would be affecting your property. In my particular instance, the topography doesn't affect my property, but the buildings do. And they kind of stand as hardware in that respect. So climate zone, like I said, our climate zones informed by our temperatures and precipitation rates. So a cool, temperate, maritime climate is where I'm living, right? I could spend an hour explaining to you about climate zones, but I'll just kind of leave it as that because you can, like, I can break it down into very small chunks, but I'll have to explain the whole concept. And rather than doing that, I think I can just put it out there. And this is something you can type into Google. Put in your address and climate zone ? And boom, you'll be able to get which climate you're in. And that'll inform what plants you pick, what systems you want to put in place. There's a lot of different things that it'll inform, and it's available data, right? So hardiness zone is another one like that. This one's a bit easier to explain. So the USDA wanted to standardize plant information. So they created a set of zones going from 1, which is right up in the Arctic, right down to 13, which is like a super heavy duty tropical climate, like right around the equator. And each of these geographic zones represent relative climatic conditions that are relevant to a plant's growth and ability to live. So here in Ireland, we are in a zone 9A, and that means that we are on the same kind of planting schedules as places like Washington in the United States and what else? Like, yeah, Seattle, Washington would be probably one of the closest to our climate here in Ireland. That isn't another island in the Atlantic, right? I got my soil map from the EPA. You can see it here. This is a breakdown of all the soil basically in Munster. This is what to expect, right? And here, if we zoom into my area, I should have expected coarse, loamy soil, right? But I go dig a hole in my back garden and I know that I've got clay soil. So my soil is about 60 to 65% clay, which completely like disagrees with this. So this data is not important because my observations tell me that it's not true for my area because it's generalized data, right? My observations on the ground are hugely important, not the what would you say, like, yeah, generalized data is the easiest way to go. Kian, you have a question.
Yeah, how do you know it's clay soil?
So I did a soil jar test. What you end up doing is you take like a bucket of soil, or you take like a scoop of soil, you put it in water and you let it settle out and you get to see the layers in your soil. So like the layers of what is contained in your soil. You can also actually just send it off for a soil analysis if you wanted to. But yeah, I mean, this is something that you get a hang of. Like I know it's clay soil because I've dealt with clay soils before and I know what to expect. But if I was expecting a coarse, loamy soil, that's a completely different kettle of fish altogether. That drains better than the soil that I have. That would be more susceptible to large trees. Large trees tend to not like clay soils so much. So like it just kind of informs what we plant basically. So our community, right? I'm going to talk about the locals first in my community. And what I mean by locals is the species that were here before us and will probably be here after us, and they're adapted to this area, right? So we have tons of animals, which is fantastic. Like I said, my dad's been feeding the birds for so long that they have become a regular feature in our back garden, which is awesome because they're bringing in tons of manure, right? They're bringing in seed from wildflowers. They're bringing in plenty of really good quality nutrient for my system. I could go through this list. I mean, this list is only a handful of what I've seen. I was really excited to see a buzzard. That is, it's so nice to see a high predator, like not quite apex, but like high up on the food chain. That shows that the system is like relatively stable around me. And the small vixen, I saw her maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was one night, and I just saw her kind of zipping away, and I was like, "That's really cool." So that means there's a young female fox in my area. Hopefully, there'll be some cubs, right? We want to have as many animals around us as possible. Um, on the other side of that, though, the locals from the plant side of things is quite decimated, right? So about 15, 20 years ago, this was farmland. About 150 years ago, this was woods. So when it was woods, it was good soil. Then the farm ate the soil, for want of a better description. The soil became useless. It was turned into a housing estate. So essentially, all nature is trying to do in this area right now is recover. And these are all recovery plants. Most people would describe all of these as weeds. So I really don't like the word weeds. Let's think about them more like recovery systems. So they're all doing a little job to try and make that soil healthy again. And we keep cutting them back. They keep trying. We keep cutting them back. The cycle continues, right? But we have two medicinals, two or three medicinals on that list straight off the bat. I mean, we've got dandelions and plantain. Um, Nettles can be taken as a medicinal. They're really high in vitamin C. But these are the available plants. These are the locals, the ones that were here when we got here, right? Now we're going to talk about the imports. So on the import side of things, humans didn't really bring many animals to this area. And it's strange because we'll see a huge plant list, but realistically, my dad brought some koi, and I know there's a few cats around. That's the only non-local animals that are living in my area. And then the plants, I mean, like this is just a handful of the plants that I've planted in our house. And it massively outweighs the number of plants that are here locally. So we want to invest very heavily on bringing plants into a system because it'll bring in the animals. And then you're getting the balance of not having to take care of wild animals, but providing wild forage so that your wild animals are fit and healthy. Okay, so we're going to build the sector map with the information we've just talked about, right? We've got my little plot, my little square. We've got north up the top, right? So from the sun sectors, we can tell where our sun is going to come up in the, like I said, in the summer solstice, way, 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 way back there, and in the winter solstice, like there. So in between these two slices on the outside is where our sunset is going to be every day of the year. It's going to travel along that edge and then back, and then along and then back, right? Then, like I said, we've got southwesterly wind that comes at our property. So here comes the wind. That's coming in. That's the wind sector for my property. And we've got the animals. These are all representing the little animals, bringing in all the goodies. They're bringing in poop, and they're bringing in seed, and they're bringing in all sorts of goodies, really, really enriching our system. So we want to welcome those in. We want to welcome the sun in, but we want to block off that wind when we don't want it, right? So sectors are all about, I want it, bring it in. I don't want it, keep it out. Is that making sense to everybody? Yeah? Relatively simple. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. If you got some value out of this program, please like and share. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more videos like this. And if you have a project that you'd like me to consult with or would like me to teach you anything to do with permaculture, please contact me directly. Have a great day.